How's it going? My name is Austin Hamilton, back here with the DadLife podcast. I've got a special guest on today. His name is Dr. Paul Lynch, and he's a local doctor here. We're going to have a conversation today about a lot of topics, ranging from him and his being a doctor, his background, to COVID, to parenting, to all sorts of stuff. So, Dr. Lynch, I'd love to just hear your background. Where are you from? Who are you?
Thanks for having me today, Austin. I really appreciate it. We've been friends for a long time, and your viewers might know that you helped me in the beginning when I was first starting my practice way back in 2007 here in Arizona. And so thank you for that, and thank you for having me on the show today. So I'm an anesthesiologist. I'm a pain management physician. I've kind of lived all around the country, but I grew up in Kentucky and Indiana, and then made my way to Oklahoma, where I went to Oral Roberts University, which is a Christian university in Tulsa. A lot of that's part of my background and my story, I think, of who I am. I always wanted to be a psychiatrist my whole life. My dad's a therapist, and I grew up reading his books, and his books on parenting, for example, we're going to talk a little bit about today. I read those when I was 12 and 13. If you asked me at 13, I had advice about how to raise children, even though I didn't have any children.
That's scary.
And so I've been thinking about topics like parenting my whole life. I went to college, became a psychology major. My whole goal in life was to become a psychiatrist. And so I'm really excited to talk to you today about parenting and why that's close to my heart. But my career changed, and I went all the way through to 3 weeks from graduating from medical school, believing I was going to be a psychiatrist. I wanted to be a psychiatrist for literally like 15 years. And so the thing that changed is my mother-in-law, my wife's mom, Pat, was diagnosed with just a rapidly progressive form of cancer. And she was in the hospital. It was a form of pancreatic cancer, and tumors had spread to her spine and throughout her abdomen, and she was just suffering in pain. And so the family asked me to come help with pain control. And I went to the hospital, and I saw what was going on, and I would go home at night, and I would Google, and I would research. In medical school, we don't get a lot of training on pain. And I started Googling all these solutions. One of them, for example, was called a vertebroplasty, because she had 7 fractures in her spine where tumor had gone into the bones. And what I found is the first time I ever read about this procedure. I didn't know about it in medical school, but you could take very small needles. We call them trocars because they're a little bit bigger. You could put them through X-ray guidance into the bones without hitting any of the organs or anything. And then you could blow up a balloon. It's actually called a kyphoplasty when you use a balloon. You blow up a balloon, and you could make the bone go back to normal. And then you put cement in it, and the cement would set up within minutes, and the pain would go away. And I read that like, this is crazy. This is like Star Trek stuff. Like, we could take away her pain. And by the way, the procedure takes less than an hour. And I sat there and I looked at my screen, and I was like, I want to do this with my life. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people that are suffering. And so my whole life, I thought I was going to help people that were suffering with mental pain. And I realized in that moment, like, I want to help people that are suffering with physical pain. And maybe I can help their mental pain too, because I got this background in psychology. I had a degree in psychology. And I just made a decision. Like, in that moment, it was probably 11 o'clock at night, sitting there Googling, this is what I'm going to do in my life. And so what did I do? I went over to my best friend's house. He also went to school with me. We both went to ORU. And I knock on his door, and he's like, bro, what's up? And I'm like, I got to show you what I just learned. And I like throw on the table like all the stuff that we had printed out on vertebroplasty, kyphoplasty, procedure called spinal cord stimulation, which I won't get into now. Super cool, advanced technology on helping people. I was like, that's what I'm going to do in my life. And so he looks at it and goes through it and is like, me too.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like, no, dude, like, we're about to graduate medical school. I've already signed a contract. I'm supposed to.
Had you matched already into psych?
Yeah, so you know the background. Your dad was a physician.
My dad was a doctor, and my wife worked at the U of A med school in admissions program. So that's a rigorous process. Yeah. You can't just change that.
No.
But you did.
No, I did.
How'd that happen?
Well, I'll tell you. So it's so back to me and Tori, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night now. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. And he's like, me too. And I'm like, no, I'm really going to do it. Like, yeah, me too. And we go back and forth. We're like, well, how are we going to do this? And then we got to go talk to the dean. So we had started the match process a year and a half before, and filling out applications and explaining what we wanted to do and why I wanted to be a psychiatrist. I'd signed a contract. I'm supposed to show up in 3 weeks to Hillside Hospital in New York City. It was one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I wanted to be a child psychiatrist. That's what I wanted to do. And so we go to meet with the dean, and I go in first, and I'm like, hey, I kind of feel like God's telling me that I'm supposed to be a pain doctor. And he's like, no, like, no, you cannot do this. I won't support it. I won't sign the letter. I was supposed to like get a letter and like withdraw from the match. And then I'd have to sit out a year and reapply. And I was totally committed, but he just flat out told me no. And as we get into this podcast, you'll see I like rules and I'm a rule follower and and so I was like, okay, he said no. So I went out and I told Tori, I was like, yeah, he said no. There's no way he's supporting us, and we have to do 1 year, and then we can next year look at it and think about it if we haven't changed our mind. Tori's like, whatever. God told us to do this. Let me go talk to this guy. And so he goes in and shuts the door. And I don't know what he said, but like a couple minutes later, he opens the door. He said he'll support us. I'm like, what?
Wow.
Great job.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So like I had the original idea, but it wouldn't have happened without friendships and partnerships. And Tori made it happen. And that's Tori's personality. He's not going to be told what to do if he knows that this is what we're supposed to do. So I won't bore you with all the details. We had such an interesting career, but I got into a wonderful surgery program within 3 weeks. Wow. I got accepted at Beth Israel in New York City. I got accepted into NYU Anesthesia, one of the top anesthesiology programs in the country the next year. I never sat out one day.
Wow.
God opened all the doors. And it's been amazing, wonderful career helping people that are suffering with pain.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have a very interesting perspective, and this is near and dear to my heart. My dad was beloved. He was a family doc here in the Valley for about 40 years, and he spent 45 minutes or more with every patient, it seemed like. And he still saw like 30 patients in a day. No idea how that happened. But I mean, that's kind of what my dad was known
22 and a half
for.
hours.
Yeah. But he also worked relatively normal hours. But that's one thing he was known for, was not only did he provide great care, but he also got personal with people. Like he had great bedside manner to be able to connect with people in an empathetic and compassionate way. Yeah. And that doesn't happen very often. I had knee surgery about 2 years ago. I had a bucket handle meniscus tear. You know what that is?
I've heard of it.
It's a real bad, treat it. It's a real bad knee injury. And the surgeon was fantastic, right? Bedside manner, though, I mean, throw that out the window, right? But my knee's great now, so
that's good.
The surgeons tend to be like that, right?
You want a surgeon who doesn't have the best bedside manner, but is really good at fixing stuff.
Yes.
And then you want the doctors that are making the decisions for you long term to have that bedside manner.
Yeah.
They did research and basically showed that if you just sit down and look the patient in the eye, they'll estimate that they spent twice as much time as you if you walk in the room and stand and are in a big hurry.
Look at your chart or something.
And so you always want to get down eye level. We're going to talk about that in parenting later. Look people in the eyes, listen to them.
Yeah, cool. So that's fascinating how you got into your current profession now. And Tori is your partner still today, right?
Yeah, he's still my business partner. We work at Arizona Pain together. We've been best friends since we were 18. So we met on the very first day of college, 27 years ago.
Wow, cool. So recently, I've seen a lot of your content on YouTube and Facebook. You've been doing a lot with COVID. We're going to talk a lot about parenting, part of Dr. Lynch's background as well. But you went to New York City kind of right when the pandemic started, to Bellevue Hospital, which I learned was the first hospital in the country. Yeah, I bet you knew that. What was that experience like? And why did you do that, first of all?
Yeah, so I think the why, so my wife and I both went to NYU. She was at NYU Dental and I was at NYU Anesthesia. We lived in New York City for 5 years. My oldest son, Alex, was born in New York City. And so Arizona is my home for life. But in my heart, I feel a little bit like a New Yorker sometimes. I lived there for 5 years at very key moments in my life where I got married and I went there and I trained, I had a baby. And so I feel very connected to New York. I was there at 9/11.
Wow.
I was in Queens and the towers fell. And I was a medical student, not a doctor. And I got on the train and I went into the city, just ran towards the smoke is what it really was. And I got off the train and I ran down to St. Vincent's Hospital, which is no longer there. And I went in and I had like my white coat on and everything because I wanted to help and look legit, And they sent me away. They said, "There's no one here. Everyone's dead. Wow. There's nothing to do." And I felt so helpless, just so in that moment, standing there at ground zero, seeing the smoke go up. There's nothing you can do. I think it gave me legit PTSD. I've got a lot of patients that have been through much worse, and so I don't want to ever belittle what PTSD is like. I have so many soldiers from Iraq that have seen so much worse. But, for years they made movies about those things, and it took 5 years before I could watch an episode or a movie or anything about, because it was just so overwhelming to me emotionally to see the towers and the smoke, and there was no flame. It was just smoke going into the sky. It went into the sky for probably 60 days.
Yeah.
Every
Wow.
time you leave your house in Queens, you'd see the smoke. And it, so I think I had like a legit form of like PTSD. And then I was in New York, so we'd see the patients, or we'd see the family members, or we'd have stories, and it was constantly for the 5 years I was there. It happened 9 days after I moved to New York, so it was like one of the first things that happened when I went. It took me 10 years before I could go to the memorial and kind of get over it. And then I started to recover, and so and most of New York had recovered. When COVID hit in the spring, I mean, I'm a scientist, and I started reading the data, and I was on vacation in early March, and I knew this was going to be a big deal, that it was different. Every couple of years there's a big disaster and it's fine, or you see like the hurricane's coming and then it's fine. Like when I first saw it in January and February, I was like, this should be fine. And then I took a week in early March because I was on vacation, and I read through all the stuff, and I was like, no, this is really, really bad. And then it started getting really bad. I shut down my clinics really fast because I wanted to protect our patients. So we went to 100% telehealth way before anyone else, because I felt like I wanted to protect people. I wanted to protect our patients, our employees. And then I started getting the calls on social media and emails that Bellevue, it is the oldest hospital in
1799.
America. Yeah, it was a Dutch clinic. And so that's where I trained, and that's my favorite hospital that I've ever worked at, because it's like a level 1 trauma center. I call it the Mayo Clinic for the poor. They take Medicaid and anything, and it's weird. It's like you'll have a homeless person in one room, and next door would be like a diplomat, because the United Nations is only like 5 blocks away. And so we take care of everyone, but it's like the Mayo Clinic of the poor and the downtrodden in New York City. And that's where a lot of my training happened. I started getting emails and calls that over 50% of our department had contracted COVID. Because we were running around the floors and intubating people and putting them in the ICU, and it was happening so fast. They were getting overwhelmed. Both of my mentors both got COVID, and when the messages went out that they needed help, I told my wife, it was over about a week, I feel like I need to go. And then we'd talk about it and go to sleep, and then I'd wake up the next day and say, I'm not going to go. And then the next night I'd be like, I really feel like I need to go. And then I prayed about it, and I talked to my wife, and she's always so supportive. And I talked to my family, and I talked to my kids, and I did a calculation at that time and decided that there was a 0.4% chance I would die, 0.4% chance.
Wow.
And at that time, if you remember, and there's been a lot that's happened, that kill rate was super high in April.
Especially in New York.
In New York. Oh, it was like 20% of the cases, like there would be deaths that day. And it wasn't actually that high, but that's the way it was looking. And we did all the calculations, and I ran it through a 44-year-old at that time, and decided I had a 0.4%. So it was like 1 in 250 chance. However, they need an anesthesiologist. And we had talked about this before.
So Dr. Lynch has a lot of videos on YouTube kind of chronicling this journey and talking about being a dad and dad life, what that means to both of us. He in one of his videos, he explained, okay, so he wants to be an example for his kids. And going to New York in the midst of a pandemic, kind of hitting this head on, like that's a very noble gesture, right? It's like, hey, I'm hitting this. But what you said you told your kids was, the world has a problem right now. There's a big problem in the world, and what's needed right now is anesthesiologists. It's like the superheroes that can come and save the day, one of them, right? There's many people involved, but especially at that hospital in that area, there's a shortage of anesthesiologists. And when I watched that video, I was like, I just imagine you put on your cape and you said to your kids, hey, I'm going, I'm suiting up, I'm going to fly there and treat people. And that's what you did.
Well, and that's pretty much exactly what I told the kids. I said, somehow the world has concocted this crisis, and they need extra anesthesiologists. That's what I do. So I can't sit on the sideline. And that's what we needed. We literally needed people to intubate. And it sounds crazy. We just need people that knew how to intubate, to secure the airway, to get them to the ICU and to manage them. And your viewers may not understand this, but anesthesiologists are really good at managing people in the intensive care unit, because we're very good, like in cardiac anesthesia cases, we have people like on the edge of, life and death all the time. And so that's kind of what I did. I went there to work, to help intubate, to manage people in the ICU. I was afraid for a lot of reasons. And probably me getting sick was like the least of my worries. I was afraid. I hadn't done this in like 10 years. Like I'm a pain management doctor. I'm
Right.
helping people in a nice, cozy clinic in
Yeah,
Scottsdale.
you haven't been doing ER in a while on that side.
Right. I haven't intubated anyone in.
Can you give like a
Yeah.
30-second explanation on what intubation is?
Yeah, so intubation is when someone is having a hard time breathing, and we know that's a big issue with COVID. The lungs start to shut down. Is we will put a tube into the trachea, and then we will secure it. We actually blow up a balloon, and it secures off so the air doesn't go around it, and then we can put you on a ventilator and push air directly into your lungs through a tube.
Okay, so just helping people breathe when they can't do it on their own.
Yeah, and it sounds easy, but it's actually really hard because God set up our bodies where there's not good access to your trachea, and so you have to use a device and lift and get a view, a very small little area. It's actually really difficult. You have to do hundreds and hundreds of intubations to get good at it. And as an anesthesiologist, I've done thousands of them. And so if there are people dying and they need someone to intubate, like, okay, I'm pretty good at that. It's like riding a bike.
Yeah.
Once they get to the ICU, that's a little scarier. I haven't managed someone in the ICU for 12 years, and so, but that's where we were all working on teams together. Sometimes they just needed extra hands, and what I found myself doing a lot of times was calling families and praying with them and talking to them, and like they didn't need my advanced training for that. It was more my psychology training from
totally
20 years ago.
Yeah, and that's super important. I mean, with some of your videos, you even explained, like, I felt like I had a personal connection with some of these people. And I mean, you explained a lot of them died.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the people you saw
Most
died.
Most of them.
Man, but even just having that balance of care and compassion with your skill set, right? I'm sure it came back to you like riding a bike, right?
It did, but it was, in all honesty, it was scary pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to go do something you haven't done in a long, long time. But I felt like God was telling me to.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people talk about hearing the voice of God. I think I have no idea what God's saying most of the time. I'm doing the best I can based on reading the Bible and what I believe is the right thing to do. But it's really rare that it's like God says, go to New York. He didn't do it in this situation. I felt like God was telling me to go, and I went, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm there, and I'm like, okay, God, I'm following you on this. I don't really know what to do. I feel uncomfortable. This person's dying in front of me. They're on this. And it's like, I did my best to take care of people. And luckily, I had my mentor there, and we had good doctors, and we all worked together as teams. And I learned a ton, an absolute ton. And even stuff that we've been able to bring back to Arizona, so, yeah.
Cool. So, yeah. So okay, 0.4% chance you got COVID. Now you're in a hospital or a hotel room by yourself in New York. You got 5 kids and a wife at home, and you're looking at all the data. I mean, you obviously made it back, but what was going through your head?
I honestly don't remember feeling scared after I got it. I was scared twice. I was scared when I got to the hospital, and they almost didn't approve me because I had high blood pressure and I had asthma. And both of those were going to discount me from even serving. But they made me wait in like
this was after you got COVID?
No, this is before.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I'm kind of jumping around, but I was only scared twice that I can remember on the whole trip. And so, and this probably lasted, that was in New York like 3 weeks all in. But when I got there, they sent me, and normally they would just check form. And they got to me and they're like, yeah, you shouldn't be here. You have asthma and high blood pressure. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah, we don't know if we're going to approve it. And they go sit over there and wait. I waited like 2 hours. And the whole time I was sitting there, I was like, why am I doing this? Did God really tell me to do this? Like, maybe this is a bad idea. And so I wait like 2 hours, and I can remember feeling really afraid, like to the point where I almost got up and just left. Like, if they weren't going to let me, like, maybe I should not be here in the first place. So they finally got a doctor to come see me, talked it through. My blood pressure issues aren't that bad. My asthma, I got to be careful of. We talked about it and decided I should do it. And then the fear went away, and I went to work. That was the first day. And then I got scared again maybe 10 days later because one of the doctors that got sick in our department came in to get some supplies, because all of us, we would get sick and we go take care of ourselves because we're like anesthesiologists and we don't want to be in the hospital. It's like men in driving directions.
Sure.
So
yeah, I'm fine. I got this.
I got this. So this doc came in to get some supplies, and me and my mentor went downstairs to bring him like a pulse ox and some extra batteries, and I can't remember what else, because we would all like have pulse oxes on our fingers the whole time. And so is our oxygen good, And he looked like he was dying.
Oh, man.
He looked pale, and like it scared me really, really bad. And I can remember going back upstairs and like my heart beating. And then and then I got like a phone call, and I can't remember the details because it's been too long. But I just felt like a peace, like everything would be fine. And then that peace lasted all the way through getting sick, which was probably like 5 days later. I got sick and I went home, and I just felt like God's got this under control. And so honestly, I was in the hotel room. My oxygen was dropping. I had my pulse ox. I'm looking at, this is not right. I had a fever. I never felt scared during that, which was, I think that was just, God
Yeah,
giving
and you're
me
sitting
peace.
there. What should I do? I should make YouTube videos, right? And that's what you did.
Well, and that happened a little before. I never thought I was going to make videos, but we have a really great doctor in town named David Ray, and he's an anesthesiologist. And I did a meeting with my entire staff before I left and told them that I felt like God was calling me to go, that, that they needed help. I wasn't sure how long I was going to be gone. I announced the whole thing, and there were tears, and we were anxious. And I think back then we didn't know. It's different than today. I mean, today, I think we all understand COVID. If I went today, I don't think I'd feel as anxious. Back then, I mean, I had no idea what was going to happen. And so when I was leaving, David came over and said, hey, what you're about to do is going to be a life-changing opportunity for you. And he's a good Christian friend. And he said, I think you should do 2-minute update every day of what happened during your day, because it'll be good for you, and maybe you can share it with other people. And I was like, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that. So on the very first day, I did 2 minutes, just like he told me. And then it got longer and longer, and because I talk too much and I like to teach, some of my videos have turned into like 30 minutes. But
yeah, well, and I mean, so that's when I kind of started following you. Here's your YouTube channel. This goes back to 7 months ago, and Dr. Lynch has been very consistently posting these videos, and a lot of information that I have heard on the news. I'll get one opinion about it or one point of view, and then one thing I've appreciated about your content is you say, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm a doctor, and you're relaying the information. One of probably the most interesting things I've learned from you recently is early on, there was some data about, well, overall deaths year over year actually are about the same, more or less, and we're just reattributing deaths to COVID when really people are maybe dying from whatever, heart disease, lung disease, all that. But what's actually happening is overall deaths are about 10 to 15% up from last year, depending on the week or month you look at it. And when I saw that with your cited source on all your videos, I thought, oh, okay, there's maybe more to this than what the media is telling us, right? And I really appreciate that about your content. You're not just spewing out random non-facts. You're backing them with data and links, which I think is super important.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, and thank you for acknowledging that, because numbers can lie, and it depends on who's looking at the numbers and what their agenda is and what they're trying to teach and what they believe. And I do the very best I can to dig into every single source and understand it myself before I start teaching it. If I'm wrong and someone calls me out on it, I'll go back and research it and try to update. Hey, I was wrong on this. I've been wrong several times this year. Even what you said there, my most recent understanding of the data is, I would say, if you look at March to March, so look at that 12-month window, not 2020, because it's complicated, right? Like, we haven't reported our deaths for the last 8 weeks. The first 8 weeks of the year was fine. So we're only looking at 2/3 of the year with death rates. If you look at March to March, and then you go out, it's called 12 weeks. So call it June 1st of next year, and you do a retrospective look at that March to March. The year-over-year death rate may be up 25 to 30%.
Wow.
And we're waiting for the final data, but it will not be crazy if we come in at 6, 7, 800,000 deaths more. And it's going to take everyone 8 months to know this, but I'm telling you now for the first time, because I've been tracking it, and we have tracked week over week over week, anywhere from 40% increase in deaths down to 10% over this year. And right now we're getting ready to hit the darkest days. We had like 3,500 deaths yesterday in the United States just from COVID. And so June, bring me back and we'll look at the data. I'll tell you, it's probably going to be a 700,000 increase in deaths over a normal base of like 2.8 million.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll definitely do that. And we could talk about COVID all day, but if people want to know your perspective on it, go follow him on YouTube. He's got a lot of great stuff. But the last thing, I have 2 questions around that. Masks and vaccines, same question. What do you say to somebody who doesn't want to wear a mask? What do you say to someone who doesn't want to get a vaccine? And then also, you've said a number of times, give me 5 more months, right? Like, you're giving all this knowledge. You're telling people, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Give me 5 more months. So just answer those 2 questions real quick. And then also, what's behind the 5 months, and how confident are you on, like, we're going to be more or less out of the woods here in about 5 months?
Let me start with the 5 months. There's a great website, IHME. I think it's .org. You could even pull it up in real time. I know you're good at that. You can click on IHME, and then and you can actually pull up Arizona, and you can look at all sorts of, sorry, I'm going to give you a second to pull that up.
Is this it?
No. Just go to Google and hit IHME. It's not .org, clearly. Sorry, just go to Google. There we go.
Healthdata.org.
Yeah, and then, oh man, the problem is trying to do this in real time. I've got it saved on mine. Well, it doesn't matter. Let's keep moving. So I'll send you a link to it later, but I'll pull up Arizona on a daily basis and try to predict where we're going to be with total cases, with deaths, with hospitalizations each month. And these guys have been spot on since June when I first started following them. Almost everything that they've said has come to fruition, and you can look at it from a national basis and you can look at it on a state basis, and it makes sense because it's like the best guys in the world. It's like you're good at making websites, and if you say, hey, this is how you do search engine optimization, you generally know. Well, the same thing with people that have spent 40 years of their career studying disease patterns and how they track. They're actually pretty good at predicting, what the virus is going to do. And so when I say 5 months, there you go. So you have Arizona. What you can do is you can scroll down. This one's not very helpful because it shows total. This one, now you can start to see daily deaths. And you can see that the prediction is our daily deaths are going to peak around the end of February, and then they start to come down really, really fast. And the reason they come down really, really fast is because we're going to start widely deploying the vaccine. And also just the nature of waves. So a big wave here, big in the summertime, and then a second big wave. And then we probably would have had a third wave, except we're going to crush it. We're going to crush it with the vaccine. And this isn't just like we got this kind of crappy vaccine. We have a vaccine, 2 of them now, with 95% efficacy. That's so incredible. And so when we first talked about this, we were all afraid. We didn't know what was going to happen. How many years is this going to last? How long is it going to take to get a vaccine? But in the background, there were these scientists doing research on messenger RNA for 20 years. And so they had this theory. Think about messenger RNA as like an email. Like someone sends you an email like, hey, Austin, in the future, if you get COVID, here's how you fight it. It's literally a string of information using amino acids that tells your body how to make one little small protein. That's it. Think about vaccine technology for years and years and years. We're taking the virus and putting it in your body. And they would take either a live virus, which sounds really scary, or you take an attenuated virus where it's kind of alive, but it's been taken away its ability, to do everything it does, or a completely dead virus, which is more common. And you put like a dead virus in there so it can't make you sick, but your body recognizes it. Now we're way beyond that. We just have like a little sequence of messenger RNA that codes for one little protein, the spike protein on the outside of the coronavirus. It's like one of the descriptions I saw from one of our epidemiologists was, it's like, we send your body an email on how to fight it in the future. It immediately disappears like Snapchat. And in the future, if you get it, you know how to fight it. That's basically the technology.
So is that why we're starting with old people? Because they're really good at forwarding emails to everybody else?
Yes, and healthcare workers too. I made a joke this week that I used to work at Spam, the people that made the canned meats. It was terrible because no one would ever open our emails. But anyways, so when I tell people, give me 5 more months, in Arizona, we're down to like, give me 3 or 4 more months. The data is pretty clear that it's going to start dropping off really, really fast. We're going to see our daily case rates come down maybe as soon as the middle of January. We're going to see our deaths start to come down about 4 weeks after that. I'm expecting my business to get back pretty much to normal by April. And so when I say give me 5 more months in Arizona, give me 4 more months of wearing your masks, socially distancing, because we're almost to the other side of this. And it's been a terrible, terrible year. It is the worst right now. And so, it's predicting where we're at today and where we're going to go. But to your second question on vaccines, the key with vaccines, I gave a talk to my entire clinic yesterday. We got on the phone, or all my clinics, and we had like 100 people on. I wanted to talk about the vaccine because we got an email from the state. Hey, we're rolling this out. You guys are healthcare workers. Now, we're not going to get it first. Someone had asked me that question on social media today. We're filling out all the paperwork, and we're going to get in line and get it whenever it's available. But it's happening so fast. I think the state of Arizona got like over 300,000, vaccines. And so we're going to be in line if we want it. But that's the key. Only 60% of Americans want it right now. And it makes sense. It makes sense because it came to market so fast, and we haven't had a chance to educate everyone. And there's a lot of distrust of the government in general. And so when I got on the call with my employees, I took some notes, like I did for you today. Like, here's the things I want to talk about, and I wrote out, and I got down to about 10 points that I wanted to teach. And I don't have all those notes in front of me, but the most important thing that I wanted to tell them was, this vaccine works. 95% success. And that was across 75,000 people. And I read both of the big studies that have come to market, Moderna and Pfizer, and it worked. I mean, it really worked. But number two, it's safe. And it's only been 4 or 5 months or 6 months, but none of these people had really serious side effects. There was some, short-term stuff. But then immediately what I wanted to tell people was, you're not crazy to question. Like, you're not crazy. No one is going to force you to get this. Like my clinic, Arizona Pain, we're not going to make you do this. It's not going to be a requirement to work. I'm encouraging it, but it should be your decision. You should have personal choice on this. And additionally, no one's going to shame you into it. No one's going to say, oh, you're dumb for not getting this, whatever. Like, it's okay to question. And then I wanted to make the point that, like, as physicians, we tell patients all the time to do something that might be scary. And so the example I gave was like chemotherapy. Like, hey, your loved one has cancer. We're going to give them this drug that's almost going to kill them, but it's not quite going to kill them. Mm-hmm. And trust me, it's going to work. And we all do that. Like, we're all used to like, okay, I have cancer. I'm going to go do this. Or, hey, we're going to crack your chest open. You have a heart problem. And we're going to go down and we're going to replace this vessel and we're almost going to kill you. As a matter of fact, we're going to stop your heart and put you on this machine and it's going to the cardiopulmonary bypass machine. Your heart's not going to work at all for like 2 hours, but then we're pretty good at starting the heart again. Trust me, you're going to be fine. As you're saying that,
I'm like, that sounds scary.
Those
things sound scary.
But we do it all the time, and people trust their docs. Say, hey, these guys know how to crack my chest open. They're going to stop my heart. It's not going to work. Well, how are you going to stay alive? I don't know. The doctor told me it was going to work. And we do it all the time and we save lives. It's the same thing. Like, it's okay to be afraid, but it's also okay for us as physicians to say, trust us on this. This makes sense. This works. We're going to be able to save your life. And so I won't go through my whole 10 points, but that's what I said to my own practice. I think the vaccine in the short term is safe. And people say, what about long term? I don't know. I have no idea. I can't tell you what's going to happen 20 years from now, but there's no reason to believe that a short little sequence of amino acids already in our body that code for one small protein, a protein, not a virus, a protein that's like the spike protein that allows that virus to gain access to your cell, making a short little sequence of mRNA, there's no reason to believe that's going to hurt you long term. And the last thing I'll say is messenger RNA is incredibly unstable. That sounds scary, but it's a good thing. It goes in your body, it'll code for like a little protein and immediately disappear. It's never there again. It's not like going into your DNA and changing your DNA and some of the stuff that I see, on social media. It's going to go in, make this small protein go away. It's incredibly cool.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm convinced. I'll get it. I don't want to be first.
Yeah. But you don't want to be made to get it.
And I don't want to be made to get it. Yeah. If somebody
agree.
says you must get this, okay, I'm going to have some more questions.
I agree.
But yeah, I think I appreciate that. It's a good explanation. And I one of the things I've thought with people saying don't force me to get it, in some ways, we're already forced to get vaccines anyways with kids in school, right? I mean, if you don't have certain vaccines and there's an outbreak with some of those diseases, you can't go to school, right? And so in some ways, it's not a whole lot different than that. But I think the time to market is what has a lot of people a little concerned about it. But it sounds like a relatively low risk.
Well, I think I've been using a lot of World War II analogies World War II, we did a lot of things really, really rapidly. If you look at the United States, like we won that war. I'm not a historian, so some people have taken me to task online and say, well, it was a world effort. And I think there's truth to that. But we got involved and we won. And I mean, think about what we did with the Manhattan Project. Mm-hmm. It was like, okay, so the scientists say we can split a cell and completely blow up a city.
Have a bomb that'll blow up half the world.
No one would have believed that. We can win this war by splitting a cell. And people are like, what are you talking about? And we brought it to market in like 18 months. Right? And so it's the same kind of thing. Like, we've done this before where we have really great scientists that have these ideas and we win. And these are two American companies. And, we had a partnership with Germany, ironically, for this conversation with Pfizer, but Pfizer is an American company and Moderna is an American company. And like, we're going to win this war. And it makes me excited. It makes me proud to be an American that we were part of, like, we're not just going to save, people in the United States. This vaccine, or these two vaccines that look like they're really going to lead the way, are going to save like 50 million lives. Mm-hmm. That's how many people would die from this eventually if you just let COVID run its course around the world. And to be fair, it's not just going to be Moderna and Pfizer. There's like 4 more coming. Johnson & Johnson's going to come out pretty quickly. The AstraZeneca stuff's had a bunch of issues, but they look like they're going to be coming out. And so, I would get the vaccine. You shouldn't be forced to get the vaccine, but someone like me should spend my time explaining the science to people so that you feel more comfortable. Yeah. And the most important thing is to feel validated, that you're not crazy to question it. It's totally okay to be like, hey, is this really the real deal? But I've looked at it and I'm certainly going to get vaccinated. Even though I've had COVID. By the way, a lot of people don't understand that. They're recommending we still get vaccinated because we'll have a more robust long-term response. And instead of me getting COVID in 6 months again or a year, maybe I'll have 2 or 3 years of protection. And that would be important for me as a healthcare worker, especially. I wanted to answer your question on mask because you asked that and I never got to it. Mask is so controversial, and it's the same kind of thing. Like, you're okay to question masks. But now we've had, 6 or 8 or 9 months, and we've had all sorts of case studies and cities that have done it and counties that have done it and counties that haven't. And the bottom line is it's a physical barrier, and it is going to slow the spread. If you wear a mask, it's not going to protect you as much as you want. It's going to protect you maybe 20%, but it's going to protect people around you maybe 50, 60%. So it's not like a 95% efficacy of a vaccine. It's just kind of dampening it down. I think of it as numbers. And so the FDA said for this vaccine to be approved, we want a minimum of 50% efficacy. That's what they wanted. And 50% might not sound like much, but it's the concept of an R0 where it's reducing the spread. And if everyone got 50% reduction, now the virus stops spreading. And so it's just a math game. The mask, I would think about it, it's not 95% efficacious like a vaccine, but it might be 20.
Well, and if
30.
we're compounding all those things, mask, vaccine, social distancing.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's just all moving us in the direction. But I think it's been very off-putting to people to be forced to do it. And I think you brought that up earlier.
That's kind of my thing is if somebody asks me to wear a mask, great, I'll wear a mask. But once we have a requirement, that's when I'll still do it. Yeah. But I'm just like,
it's harder.
It's just harder. And I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, no, for sure. And honestly, I think that's where Arizona, one of the things that makes us great, our pioneering. I mean, think about what it took for our ancestors to move to the middle of a freaking desert. Oh, it never rains there? Let's go live there. Oh, it's 120 degrees? Perfect. That's going to be, I'm going to, put my flag in Phoenix, Arizona. Think about our ancestors it took to come conquer, Mother Nature. We don't like to be told what to do. We're a little bit mavericks. We like to carry guns. This is the things that make us great during COVID maybe hurt us because we're, our spirit of don't tell me what to do and I've got this, I think has actually put us a little bit more at risk.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. We spent a few weeks over the summer in Portland, Oregon, where the requirements are a little stronger than here.
Yeah.
And what I experienced being there is people took it less seriously in general, out and about at coffee shops or restaurants than they do here, where I would say our rules comparatively are more lax in terms of requirements.
Right.
Right. So I thought that was interesting to notice. You force it on people.
Right.
Sometimes they'll reject it, but if you give them the choice, they tend to respond to it better.
I love choice.
Yeah. Big fan of choice, personal responsibility. So again, we could talk all day about, you could talk all day about COVID. You're obviously very credible on the topic. I appreciate that. I would encourage you, if you want to know more, go follow Dr. Lynch on YouTube, on Facebook. I'll put links in the video description. But let's talk about parenting. So you've got 5 kids.
Yes, I do.
A whole range of them. And obviously you went through a big decision-making process when you went to New York and having your kids and your wife in mind. But you wrote down 17 points just kind of off the cuff on parenting tips, which are great, right? We're not going to cover them all here, but what are some things as you look at your career, your profession, kind of growing up, that you're wanting to instill in your kids and kind of principles to live by?
Yeah.
I do have some specific questions about some of the kids from what I've seen on social media, which is awesome. But life as a dad and a doctor, I mean, tell me about that.
Well, I guess as background, I've always wanted to be a parent. I told you earlier, I wanted to be a psychiatrist or a child psychiatrist. I used to read my dad's books when I was 11, 12, 13. I was excited to help children. I thought I'd be a child psychiatrist, but I really wanted to have children. I always thought about having a family. And years later, God's blessed me with 5 children. So I've got 4 boys and 1 girl. I've got a 16-year-old boy, a 12-year-old boy, a 10-year-old boy, a 6-year-old boy, and then now a 4-year-old girl.
It's a lot of boys.
It's a lot of boys. And, I was a psychology major in college, and my whole life that's pretty much been what I enjoy reading is psychology. And I have a lot of rules on parenting, and I've kind of developed them over the years, and I like to talk about it, and I like to watch people parent. I like to watch their kids, and I like to watch my kids, and I like to think about what can make me the best parent in the whole world. I don't want to just be a dad. I want to be the greatest dad of all time. I want to die and go to heaven and God say, you were a really good dad. You weren't the best anesthesiologist. You were pretty good.
That's more important.
You were the greatest dad. And we're so proud up here of what you did with your kids. That's what I want. But it takes a lot of mindful mindfulness. You're not just like randomly the best dad. You have to think about it, and it's not always easy, and you don't always get it right, and you have to read, and you have to think, and you got to ask for advice. And so being a good dad is hard, but it is achievable. And it starts with, I think, a knowledge base. And so I would just start for your viewers a few concepts. Number one, everyone gets love. Love, 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 love. Love your kids, love your kids, love, 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 love. What most parents do wrong is they don't have rules. And so there was actually a study, I studied it way back in college 20 years ago. They had like a box, and it showed a continuum of love on the x-axis and rules on the y-axis. And then some of the classic boxes where they break it into 4 groups. And so I'm not going to go through the whole study and everything, but most people think that the 2 best parents are ones that love and have a lot of rules. Most people get that right. And parents that love a lot and don't have a lot of rules. But it's not true. The best outcomes for your children are number 1 is parents who love a lot and have a lot of rules. And number 2 is parents who don't love a lot and have a lot of rules. And so the rules,
which it is not love a lot and don't have a lot of rules.
It's
counterintuitive.
What the most common parent is a lot of love and no rules.
Yeah.
And that's not actually the second best. That's like the 3rd or 4th best.
Interesting.
Because you love them and you love them and you love them. There's no rules. And these kids grow up and they just think they can do whatever they want, and they can steal, and they can, be bad people. And that love is great, but that love has to go with structure and rules. And this is what we're trying to do. And so I try to teach this to people over and over and over. When I see children that are acting bad or whatever, and they're out, it's not a love issue. It's a rule issue. And so that's the single most important thing, and I wanted to lead with that for your viewers to hear, is that you have to have rules. You have to, I have a really good friend named Doug Gentile, who's been a mentor to me for many, many years. He's a child psychologist by training. And he told me when I first called him, when I first had my first child and I was asking him for advice, he talked about the rules were important to give kids like boundaries, and then they felt safe. They felt safe because they knew this is the box I'm playing in. I can't run down the street, out on the highway, but I can play in this yard. And once they have like a rule, they're gonna have so much fun in that yard because they're comfortable and they don't have anxiety and they adapt better. But if you just say, I don't care, do whatever you want, the kid doesn't know.
Yeah.
Like, well, can I go steal at the store, or can I, what? And so the rules is such an important part of parenting. It's the first thing I always tell people when they ask me about how to be a good parent.
Yeah, so it's like having a balance of grace and truth. Just
that's
loving, leading with grace, but also there's truth, there's rules, there's boundaries, and how do you keep that in line? So one of the things you wrote on here, lots of timeouts. And at first I was like, oh, lots of timeouts. You're saying that's a good thing. But explaining why they went to timeout.
Right.
And then you only let them out of timeout once they get why they're there.
That's it.
So am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. So lots of timeouts for me. I don't like to hit kids or beat kids or spank kids. I really don't. I don't think it's necessary. But I have what I call the slightest aggravation rule. If you aggravate me even a little bit, you're going to timeout. And that's because one of my rules that I'll get to is I don't raise my voice. I never raise my voice. I never yell at my children. My children are very well behaved, but because at a very young age, if they are aggravating me, they go to timeout. And literally, if they're 2 and they throw something across the room and it breaks, I'll go to timeout. I'm not hurting them. I'm not traumatizing them. They're just going to timeout, and they learn not to throw that across the room and break it, And when they're 2, it's a very short timeout. Like the classic teaching on timeout is 1 minute per year of age. That's too long. Yep. Like if someone, a 2-year-old throws something, they're going to forget in 2 minutes what was going on. Right. So I might put them in timeout for 30 seconds and then say, come to daddy. And they run over. Why'd you go timeout? I broke your favorite mug. Okay, don't do that. You never have to raise your voice. You don't have to yell. You don't have to. Sometimes I'll use a stern look, and that's about it. And then you do that with the slightest aggravation. Sometimes I don't even know what they did. I'm like, I don't know what they did. I was kind of aggravated. And so instead of me yelling, they're going to go to timeout because they were the problem, And so they'll go to timeout. I cool down. They cool down. I never have to raise my voice. They come over, explain it to me. Sometimes we don't completely know. And I'll be like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have put you in timeout. My bad. Which one of my points, don't ever be afraid to apologize to your kids because you're teaching them by example. Like I'm wrong sometimes too. Like being wrong is part of life. Like we're all sinners. Like I said, we've all fallen and we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? And so, slightest aggravation, they go to timeout. They come over and they explain it. And I'll tell you, when they go through this phase, like 3, 4, 5, they try to act like they don't know what they did. But I've done this 5 times now, and I know that they know. And so I'll go back to timeout and think about it. And if they're really stubborn, I've had a few that have been really stubborn, they'll go back and forth 3 or 4 times. These aren't really long timeouts. 2 minutes, 3 minutes at a time. No one's getting hurt. No one's getting yelled at. There's no drama. It's just, all right, go back to timeout and think about it. 99.9999% of the time that I've done this, they come up with the right answer eventually. I was being critical of my sister, or I was being a little bit mean, or I was whatever it was that they acted like they didn't know. They knew. They just didn't want to admit it. And every once in a while, once in 1,000 times, I'll say, oh, this is what you did. They really didn't know.
Yeah. Kids are so smart, and they're also very honest. Our 3-year-old, and this was when she was 2 or almost 3. I was playing on the couch with her, and my son came up, and she like kind of kicked him right in the chest to like shove him away. And it was kind of an accident, kind of not, but I was like, he was a little distraught over it. And so I'm like, hey, bud, that was an accident. She didn't do it on purpose. And I go, Tatum, was that an accident? She goes, no, I kicked my brother. And I go, okay, go to a timeout, right? Yeah. What we do sometimes is put the nose on the wall, just put your nose on the wall for 2 minutes. Which is super cute also, watching a kid have their nose on the wall. But that rule or that principle reminds me, have you read much of Jordan Peterson or watched his videos?
I have, yeah.
So one of his rules in the 12 rules for life is never let your kids do anything that you don't want them to do. You don't approve of them doing, right? It's not the exact verbiage, but his point is basically, as you permiss this stuff as a young age, they're going to grow up doing things that nobody likes. Right. And people aren't going to like them.
Yeah.
You
like
know,
that.
And so it's one of his 12 principles. He's coming out with a new book, by the way, in March. But yeah, there's a lot there with, how do you discipline them? I would say, spanking. I've spanked a little bit, right? Every time I do it, though, I feel so bad, and I'm like, why did I do that, right?
Right.
It never out of like rage or anything, but and now that our kids are a little older, we've kind of cut that off. But same with yelling or raising my voice, doesn't happen very often. Yeah. But when I do it, when I get stern, I just feel so bad. But the point is I also want to show my kids that I can apologize to them. I can say, hey, bud, I'm sorry I raised my voice. I'm sorry I got aggravated. Yeah. And I think that at least in my phase of parenting, that's a big thing I'm learning too, is they need to see that sometimes we make mistakes. Yeah. This world is going to offer them so much. And what can we teach them in our home right now that will make them be successful in the world? So.
You talked about Jordan Peterson, don't let your kids do things that they shouldn't do. And I think that's true, but I think it's a balance. So what I've gone by, there's a famous child psychologist in Christian circles named James Dobson. And I read a lot of his books when I was a kid. I actually haven't read a whole lot as an adult. But he talked about basically the concept that your 2-year-old, you're making like 98% of their decisions. Yeah. But you want to constantly be looking for opportunities to let them make their own decisions, because it's important to try and fail and, give them a responsibility, see how they do with it. And then you want to take them from making like 2% of their decisions, because even like a baby is going to decide what they want to eat and what they don't. You can't make all their decisions, right?
It's super annoying.
So as a baby, they're going to make maybe 2% of their decisions, to all the way when they're 18 and they leave for college, they're making like 98% of their decisions. It's never 100. It's never 0. They're always going to look to you for some things. They're going to come back and say, what should I do? And you're going to literally make decisions for them all the way until the day, we die. Yeah. But I want to take my child, my 16-year-old is a lot closer to that than my 3-year-old, but I want to get them to 98% by the time they leave the house at 18.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a good principle. Jordan Peterson's exact quote is, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. It's pretty strong. Yeah. James Dobson, he's got a lot of material on that, but so your oldest is 16. Yeah. He's almost out of the house, right? Getting there. And is he the one who golfs?
He's a golfer. We have 3 golfers. He's the oldest golfer, so he's he's really talented.
Okay, so following you on Facebook and YouTube, I've seen a lot of golf stuff, right? And first of all, I don't know how you have the time to do all the stuff that you do. It's incredible. But this kid is really good at golf. You guys are all over the place all the time golfing. Right. He's placing in tournaments very high, consistently. Yeah. If I don't, I'm speculating here, but he may be a professional golfer someday.
He wants to be.
He wants to be. Yeah. Awesome. So obviously you've created some structure and discipline in him to where he is grinding to be that good, and he's succeeding in it. Yeah. Right. So what is it like having a kid like that who's obviously very talented? Right. Obviously you have some influence there in what got him there, but he's also got talent. Right. So from a parenting point of view, I mean, you're parenting a kid who is very good at his craft at a young age. Yeah. What's that like?
It's a big responsibility, and I mean, even if you just go back to how we chose golf, I think I said at the beginning of this parenting section, mindfulness is so important. Not just to randomly let life happen, but if I want to be a good dad, I've got to read books about being a good dad and talk to people about being a good dad and come up with a strategy. We didn't just randomly find golf. Matter of fact, I was racing cars, which is a story for another day. You may remember that.
I remember that. Yep.
Day. And Alex is my 16-year-old. He's just really talented. Whatever he does, he's got a 4.0 GPA. He's number one in his class in school.
Wow.
He's a really good golfer. He's really good at whatever he does. He was go-karting, and he was an amazing go-karter. And I'm racing cars, and I asked him one day, like, hey, do you want to be a professional race car driver someday? And he's like, no. And I'm like, why not? You're so good at it. And then he like simulates racing a car. And then he falls over and acts like he's dead. And I'm like, are you saying like you think you're going to get killed? And he's like, yeah. He's 7.
Yeah.
And he's like, haven't you been paying attention to all like how high risk this sport is? And like I was the medical director at that point for racing called NASA, National Association of whatever, amateur racing. I can't even remember anymore, here in Arizona. And like I'd seen a bunch of people get hurt. My buddy caught on fire. Like it's a really high risk sport. And my 7-year-old is seeing it, not me, which is kind of funny. Like we can learn from our children. So we sat down and we literally brainstormed, me like a 35-year-old man and him as like a 7-year-old boy. And we're like, what should we do?
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah. What should we, my words were, we need a new obsession. Like, what should we obsess about? Because him and I both have the same personality. We just go, 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 go. And so we went through all the sports. We got to football. To your point about, how much you should control kids. I'm like, I'm not real comfortable. If you want to play football later, you can, but not right now. I'm not going to promote football. I don't want you to get a head injury. But what about basketball? I don't know if we have the speed necessary, to really, I played basketball, but I wasn't super fast. And, like, what about tennis? It could work. What about wrestling? Ooh, that'd be fun. We literally went through every sport, and then we got to golf, and I was like, that could be fun. We could play together. And he was like, yeah. We got some golf clubs. And so we went and played together. It was like April 1st, 2012. For like the first time. I'd played like 20 times and he had never played. And he liked it and I liked it. And it's been like this journey where we played together, but we mindfully chose it because we thought it was a great sport for family. We lived in Scottsdale. There were a lot of golf courses. We can play every day of the year. And it made sense to us mentally, like this is a goal we can pursue. And so as he's got better and better and better, I think the main goal for me as a parent is to make sure he's happy.
Yeah.
Right? And so
and I think sometimes parents force their kids into XYZ sport, and then they'll do it. They'll be really good at it until they're about that age, right? 16, 17, 18, and then they hate it and they resent you for it. Right? But he's doing it for the love of the game.
He loves the game. And I've got a 10-year-old that's playing that I'm not 100% sure loves the game. He loves football and he loves basketball and and I think the balance is to make sure they enjoy it. There's a really kind of famous lady named Michelle Holmes who's on Twitter and some other places, and she's always teaching about junior golf. And I follow her, and she basically just talks about like, you're not going to make them a professional golfer today, but you can make them hate it for the rest of their life. Yeah. And so, it's all about how you position it. She talks about, tell them that you love watching them play, not that you love watching them win. Like, I was so happy watching you play today. You had such a good attitude, and I love that shot you hit. And like, don't focus so much on you won, or it's not about winning and losing. It's about enjoying, the process with your kids. And so, it's been a balance. And for me, like this driving, I want to win. I've got to just like pull that back and instead make sure that it's fun for them. Yeah. We go have fun and then we go get ice cream, or, we go play golf. And I'm always trying to reinforce their behavior on the golf course and not how they play.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm noticing that in my son. He can't stand losing at anything, right? Legos. A Lego will break and he'll just lose it. But what we're trying to instill in him is it's okay when things go wrong. You don't have to win. You don't have to be first. Yeah. Just enjoy the process, right? And I think that's interesting that you kind of had that with your son around age 7 of like honing in on what he wants to do.
Crazy.
Because I'm kind of like, okay, what is it that he's going to latch on to, right? He's about 5.5. I played a lot of video games as a kid, which now looking back on it as an adult, I'm like, I really like video games. I think they're fun, but also they can be detrimental to a kid growing up. So I think there's got to be a healthy balance there. I look at my son and he's interested in it, but sports, we're kind of at that age now where we're getting him into sports, and We'll kind of see how that develops, but that's fascinating, and I hope that he sticks to it. I hope that he continues to love it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of good that can come from that. So one of the other things that you put on here that stuck out to me, tons of quantity time, not just quality time. And then you also said you don't have a lot of friends. Your kids are your friends. So it reminds me, Dr. Meg Meeker, who's a pediatrician, and she does a lot of content online. She has a podcast. She wrote a book called Hero. It's essentially for dads just to be like the hero dad, kind of like you said. When you go to heaven, you want to be recognized as I was a great dad. Yeah. He was a great dad.
Yeah.
And she tells a story of kids who the dad took them to, on fishing trips every summer. And the kids, what they remembered about it was we went fishing all the time. Every summer we were fishing. We just fished so much. Me and my dad, we had all this bonding time. And you ask the dad, okay, what was your account of that story? He's like, yeah, I took him fishing like 2 times when they were growing up. But the point is that you don't have to do a lot for your kids to remember. And putting some sort of effort into quality and quantity time is super important. What you're saying here is quality is important, absolutely, but so is quantity.
Yeah. Too many people talk about, well, I work all week and I'm busy and I don't see my kids a lot, but when I'm there, it's quality time. And I think that's fine, but I don't really know what that means. And so what I tell people is like focus on quantity time. When I first was reading about, children and parenting years ago, there were crazy statistics like how much the average father spends with his children in a day. And the numbers are so low, it's crazy. Like I hate to even quote it. It was like 3 minutes a day or something insane because they literally just don't do it. They come home, they immediately start work and they kind of see them. They're not really spending time together. I think you should be spending hours with your children every day, like hours. Mm-hmm. And that's hard. You have to be mindful about it and you have to map out time. And when I made the decision to have 5 children and I want to be a great dad, when I put on there, I don't have friends, I don't have time, like I'm growing my business and I'm working and I'm going to work. But then when I'm done working, I'm going to go spend time with my kids and my family. Because that's, I think, it's my obligation, as a dad. And so quantity, once again, for golf, it's actually, a good example.
Oh, that's a great way to get quantity
4
time.
hours.
Yeah.
It's what an interesting sport. Like basketball. And we've talked, me and my 7-year-old, when we made this decision, 9 years ago or whatever, like we went through all the sports. Like I could go sit there for an hour and watch you play basketball, or I could take you and we can hang out for 4 hours and play. And I like the idea of golf because we could spend time together. I have a tracker on my phone called Golf Shot. I've played 1,500 rounds of golf with my children over the last 8.5 years.
Wow.
1,500. And so it's like 150 rounds a year. And people say, how do you do that? I was like, we'll do it every single weekend, Saturday and Sunday. It's not always 18 holes, it might be 9 holes, and every single weekend, and maybe once during the week at sunset. Like that's a lot of work. That's like a full-time job, but I'm spending time with my kids and I'm training them and I'm teaching them and I'm putting them in timeout and I'm watching how they interact. And like I spend a ton of time with my children, and golf helps me do that, which is kind of cool. But when I say quantity time, it may not be golf for you, but figure out something you can do with your children, something you can do together, because it's not just quality time that everyone wants to talk about. You need to spend time with them. And what I like about it is the amount of golf that I've played with my children. I have 3 now that golf with me pretty much every time, my 6-year-old, my 10-year-old, and my 16-year-old. And just for your viewers, my 12-year-old has a seizure disorder and autism. He doesn't talk, and so he doesn't play with us. But those 3 have spent so much time with me, I think they're going to be just like me. And I think that's one of your goals as a father is to make your kids like you. And if you're not happy with who you are, well, then change who you are.
Change.
And then make your kids like you, right? And so that's my goal of quantity time is I want them to be like me. I want to train them. I want to teach them. And you got to find a way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great principle, not only looking at your own kids, right? Like what feedback are you getting from the world, from people around you, from coworkers?
Right.
Do people like you or not?
Yeah.
And you can choose either one.
Right.
If it's the latter, well, you can change yourself. You can't change everybody else.
Yeah.
So your 12-year-old, Austin, I believe is his name. So he can't play golf with you guys because of what's going on with him. But so how do you connect with him? Again, can you give just a high level on kind of what he's been through and what do you do to intentionally connect with him?
Yeah, it's much harder. So he was fairly normal up until he was about 3 years of age. He spoke, and I've still got some videos of him as a 2 and 3-year-old. We knew something was wrong, but he would talk and he would play, and then he just kind of like fell off a cliff. He completely stopped communicating. He regressed to probably like an 18-month, interaction level, and he was there for many, many, many years. And I won't get into his whole story, but we started to see some success, over the last several years, and he still doesn't really talk. He's very sick. He has a seizure disorder. So when he sleeps, it's called status epilepticus of sleep. So when he sleeps, he seizes. His brain just seizes, and so he can't really organize memories and thoughts and language. And so he doesn't play golf with us. He's not really verbal most of the time, so it makes it tough. And he doesn't really, the autism side of it, he doesn't really like the human contact. So if I come in and say, "Hey, Austin," I was yelling for you earlier, "Austin." Like that's how we say it in our house. Like we're looking for him because he'll run off, and I'll go hug him, and then he generally pulls away. Like it makes it very difficult, to spend quality time or quantity time with him. But we give him an environment, and we protect him, and we're praying every day that he'll kind of come out of it.
Yeah. So one of your other things, be their biggest cheerleader, believe in them.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you look at your kids who are excelling in golf.
Yeah.
And then you've got Austin, who's nonverbal.
Yeah.
That principle transcends all, right?
Yeah.
You love your kids no matter who they are, what they do.
Whatever.
But that's, that probably looks very different as you look at all your kids.
Yeah. So when I'm talking about being a cheerleader, and I think mindfulness again, like I was a psychology major, and some of my favorite classes was learning psychology. And there's all sorts of concepts. It's an entire year course, so I'm not going to go through it. But one of them is positive reinforcement really does and truly does work better than negative. And so I talked a lot about rules in the beginning, but the rules are there as boundaries in a box that the kids can play in. But what I spend most of my day doing is smiling and encouraging the behavior that I like. And it works so well. I actually told my buddies about it in college. We had like one teacher that was always negative. And I was a psychology major. I was like, watch, I'm going to change his behavior by applying these psychology techniques. Every time he says something negative, I ignore him. And every time he says something positive, I'll make eye contact, I'll light up, I'll smile, and I'll encourage him. And I told my buddies I was doing this in an experiment. They didn't think it was going to work. And it totally worked. Like I changed this teacher's behavior by how I interacted. So every time he did something that I liked, it was all this attention and thank you. And every time he said something I didn't, I was flat and I wouldn't make eye contact. And I totally shut down that negative behavior.
Wow.
And so I do that with my children too. And I spend most of my day saying, "Oh, baby girl, you're so smart. Look at what you drew, blah, blah." All day long. You show them love and you encourage them and you tell them how great they are, literally no matter what they're doing, until they do something wrong and you put them in timeout. And that lasts and so the negative is very, very short. And what you do is you promote this happy, fun, everything you do is amazing. You can do anything. It doesn't matter if they're doing ballet or they're doing golf or they're doing baseball. You are their biggest cheerleader. There's plenty of people in the world, they're going to tell them that they suck at something. It shouldn't be you.
Yeah.
And even in golf, like I applied that technique very, very early on. Like I got Alex coaches. And if they didn't like something in a swing, let them teach it, not me. Like I'm there to tell you, you're the greatest golfer in the world, right? And then your coach can say, well, not really. You need to work on your putting. But me, I'm going to be positive. And that's not completely true. I definitely push them to work on things. But I want to spend most of my time being their biggest cheerleader. Like, do you ever see cheerleaders on the side of the fan saying, "We really screwed that last play up. That sucks"?
No, they're always positive.
They're always positive. And so I think as a parent, you want to be as positive you can for your children.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so you've got 17 things here. One of them that jumps off the paper. I'm just going to read it here.
Yeah.
Don't leave your kids alone with men. Sexual predators. Why is that on this list?
Okay. Well, so far this interview has been pretty easy. This is kind of edgy now, but I put it on there because if a young couple is having children and raising kids and they're asking me for advice, one of the things I always tell people, and I'll tell your viewers, is that sexual abuse is real. And most people don't know how real it is until they or someone they love gets sexually abused. And then they look into it and they go, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. So 1 in 4 girls, 25% of girls will be sexually abused before they're 18. 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused. And so if this is so common, why aren't we doing something about it? And probably because people are uncomfortable talking about it. Like even I put it on there, like, I don't know if I really want to talk about this. Like I'm not an expert on sexual abuse, but I am a psychology major and I've been studying humans my whole life. And I've got a lot of rules for parenting. And one of my rules is I don't leave my children alone, particularly with men. And I'm sorry to men, but they, depending on whose data you look at, men are responsible for between 90 and 95% of the sexual abuse.
Wow.
And so there are women that do it. There was one study that I looked at that actually showed 3.8% of confirmed sexual abuse was from women. And it was like 90% definitely men and 6% where the person didn't know, which is weird. I don't know why you wouldn't know. But somewhere between 90 and 95% of sexual abuse is men. Men, for whatever reason, the way God made us, are more likely to engage in that behavior. And what people don't understand, and this is where it gets really edgy and into the weeds, is people are afraid of like these sexual predators out there. But a stranger will sexually abuse your child less than 10% of the time. 90% of the time, it's someone you know. 70% of the time, it's someone in your family. And so you have to be mindful about protecting your children. And so I do that. And I have all sorts of rules. And, when I was a kid, it was normal for me to sleep over at people's houses. I don't really do that with my kids because I know how common sexual abuse is. And, I'm mindful of who's being around them, and are they being isolated, particularly with men? I've had lots of child care workers over the years, and generally we have women do that. Like, I have lots of rules, but as a parent, you should always be thinking about your job to protect your children, and you should be mindful of sexual abuse, that it is a real thing, and it could happen to your kids if you're not careful.
Yeah, totally. I've looked into some of the data on this, and it is shocking and terrible. And I think the biggest thing is these sexual predators wandering the streets.
Right.
Yes, they exist.
Yeah.
Is that your biggest threat?
Right.
No.
You're right.
Family, people at arm's length.
Yeah.
It's just terrible.
And one of the things from the data is a child that's most likely to be sexually abused is between 3 and 8. And so 3 and 8, they're so vulnerable, they're small, they don't really know what's going on. They don't completely know that it's right or wrong. And sexual predators know that. And sexual predators don't even know they're sexual predators sometimes. They just act out on urges. And so I think as parents, we need to be mindful. Like, I've got lots of rules on how I protect my kids, and I want them to be part of the conversation. I don't want them to play tackle football until they're old enough to understand the risks and benefits. And so I make those decisions. But the same way I'm making decisions on whether they're going to play football, I'm making decisions on who they're hanging out with and who I allow around my children, because I think it's my job to protect my children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, that's our biggest responsibility as parents, right? Well, we're not going to end on that note, but I appreciate your insight and kind of passion on that, because it's just way too rampant.
I think the one last thing I would say is, if a child is sexually abused, it is devastating to the rest of their life.
Yes.
And so we spent all this time talking about COVID and protecting kids. Like, if a kid gets COVID, they're probably completely fine, right? But if your child is sexually abused, if you don't have your fatherly radar up on who's looking at your kids and who's hanging out with your kids, and what about the coaches, and what about the teachers, and what about the person at church, and like, if you're not looking at that and thinking that that's a possibility, and your kid is sexually abused, they are like 10 times more likely to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. They're like 5 times more likely to get into drugs. They're like 4 or 5 times more likely to have anxiety issues or depression or PTSD long term. If they're sexually abused, it is devastating to their life. So we should be really paying attention to that issue. And anyone can be a sexual abuser. There was a study years ago, I don't remember exactly, and I don't want to overstate it, but a significant amount of kids in organized sports, particularly girls, like gymnastics or soccer or some of these, were being sexually abused by their coaches. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't allow your kids to do sports. It means that you should know where they're at, who they're hanging out with at all time, and that you're there with them as well. You don't just say, oh yeah, go on that trip to a city far away with your coach. Like, right, you have to be engaged with your children and know what's going on.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, those effects can last your whole lifetime. And when we have these adverse childhood experiences at young ages, we tend to get stuck in fears that are valid, right? But the older you get, they can become strongholds and prevent us from doing something, and unwinding all that, the later it gets, is really hard. So we can't protect our kids from everything, right? But gosh, we can certainly implement some of these principles and maybe prevent some of that from happening and lower the numbers.
We can make mindful decisions on what our children do and what we do and what we allow, and not just let things randomly happen.
Yeah. Have cool family traditions. The Lynch Golf Association. Back to golf. What is the Lynch Golf Association?
I appreciate you allowing us to talk about golf so much today. I actually wore my Under Armour shirt today.
Nice.
I love golf. So family traditions are fun. You mentioned it earlier, like the kids that they always went fishing with their dad. And dad's like, I don't know, we fished like twice. We have literally played over 1,000 rounds together as a family. We started the Lynch Golf Association in 2013, and we basically put together monthly tournaments with points and rules and our own set of rules.
Is it just for your family, or do you get other people involved?
We've invited a few people a couple times, but it's generally for our family. We've a couple times like rolled the dice and invited someone to participate in a major, and we were scared to death if they won, we'd have to put their name on the trophy.
Right.
But so far, no one besides
Yeah.
Lynch's have won. I set the handicaps too, which makes it easier. I won't really allow anyone else to win. If any of my friends are watching, they'll agree that that's true.
Nice.
But so we basically will compete on a monthly basis for the last 7 years. And I went as far as to make 4 trophies. So we have 4 majors, and if you win a major, you get your name on the trophy. We track all the trophies. We have a year-end championship, and the kids take it really seriously. They take it so seriously that Apollo, who's my 10-year-old, a couple years ago, he got invited to Pinehurst. Well, he's been invited every year, but a couple years ago for this story, he's at the World Championships, the biggest golf tournament in the whole world. And one of his coaches were there, and I was there, and we won. We played, and he wins like the Lynch Golf Association U.S. Open, and he's so happy. He's like, I did what I came here to do. And his coach is like, no, like the World Championship's starting. He's like, oh, I don't care about that. I just wanted to
won the LGA.
I wanted the LGA trophy. Like he was dead serious. Like this was a bigger deal to him than the World Championships, which made me so happy because like all these other kids are like so stressed about this tournament. He didn't even care about it. He just wanted to beat his brothers and beat me.
That's awesome.
Which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we have 4 trophies at the house. We've been running, Alex, my 16-year-old, he has like 20 majors. Like he wins he's like the Tiger Woods of the LGA, or the Jack Nicklaus, I guess, because Jack's got 18. But it's fun, and it's a tradition, and we do it, and they look forward to it. Our next major is coming up next week over Christmas holiday weekend. We're going to play our most holy tournament of the year, which is the Lynch Open, and we have like a replica claret jug from the Open in the UK, and it's got all the names on it. And that one is worth 300 points. So wish me luck.
That's awesome.
I'm going to try to beat my boys.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Those kids are pretty good though,
They're
from
good.
what I've seen.
They're good.
Man.
But I get a lot of strokes, so I've got a chance.
There you go. Yeah. Can you beat Alex?
No.
Like if it were a fair.
No. Alex is like one of the top golfers in the world in his class. He's in the class of 2023, and his handicap dropped really, really low a couple months ago because he shot 64, 65 2 days in a row at a big tournament. But he's like a +4 handicap, which is insane. And I'm like a 6. So I get like 10 strokes from him in a round, and he still beats me because he doesn't like to lose. And so no, he's really talented, and he does want to be a professional. And he's getting better every day, and we're kind of taking it one step at a time. But next summer, June 15th, the coaches can start calling because there's rules on when they can contact kids. So June 15th, after his sophomore year, he can start talking to the coaches. That's gonna be really fun to see where he decides to play college golf, and definitely gonna play Division I somewhere. We'll just see what he does next.
That's great. Your phone's gonna be ringing off the hook.
I hope so.
That's
It's gonna be fun to see.
Yeah. Okay, 2 more things, then we'll wrap it up. But pray with them, go to church with them.
Yeah.
So you're a man of faith.
Yes.
What does this mean? How do you implement this in your life?
Yeah, so I think, and this is something that I don't think I did really well, probably their first half of their lives. Like I'd take them to church, but I wouldn't actively engage with them as much as I should have. And I think probably over the last 4 or 5 years, I've got a lot better at it. Part of that's because I was just working so hard. All of us have our stories, but when I was like, Alex was born when I was in residency. And so he was there with me while I was still training. And I was working 120 hours a week. I wasn't like going home and praying with my 3-year-old. So, and then I came right into Arizona, and I launched Arizona Pain, and I'm building clinics and teaching, and like, I just work. And then I've been able to get a little bit more balance in my life over the last 4, 5, 6 years. I think it's so important not just to say that you're a man of faith, but that you lead your children, by example. And so, Alex and I will, often, not every day. We went for a while there, a couple years, every single day, where we'd wake up in the morning and pray. And we'd read the Bible, and we'd talk a little bit and start the day. And then I do it with my other children, and we've had, depending on my work schedule, because I have a complicated work history, but I run clinics in Texas, and I work in Arizona, and so I'm all over but depending on the schedule, I'll try to get up in the morning with them, read with them, pray with them. And I think as men, that's our obligation, is that we don't just teach them how to be a good golfer, but we teach them how to have a relationship with God.
Yeah, and in that especially, more is caught than taught, right? So are we leading them in it? Are we do they see us reading the Bible? Do they see us and hear us praying? One thing I've done with my kids every night, I'm sure, basically every night, is we sing Amazing Grace together.
There you go.
Before we go to bed.
Yeah.
and it's the cutest thing ever. I took a video of my daughter the other day singing Amazing Grace. Only the first verse, because that's the only one I know. I should probably learn the other ones, but
it's the best one.
Yeah. She's 3. She sings it. It's so cute. And I'm just like, gosh, those words in that song are so powerful for me. But, how can we show by example, lead with them, get that stuff in their head? At the end of the day, it's their choice, right? We can't control everything, but how can we expose them to that? So
I was going to say, when you talk about your daughter too, we talked a lot about golf, but mindfulness. I'm watching my daughter, and I don't know for sure. I don't think she likes golf. And I base that on, like, I give her a club and she'll swing and miss. And what she really likes is she'll spin. It turns into a dance. And so her golf swing almost always turns into a spin and a dance. I'm like, I don't know if she really likes the golf as much as she likes the dancing. And as a mindful parent, I don't want to push her into golf if that's not what she loves. But she loves singing. She loves the piano. And so as I'm mindful with her, I've got my traditions with my boys. But with her, one of our biggest traditions is I sing to her at night. And so she comes in, I play the piano. The other boys don't care. She always comes in, sits in my lap. She likes that. So she'll sit there with me and I'll play the piano and I'll sing to her. And like, that's a tradition that her and I are starting. And I'm just being really mindful of like, okay, well, what do I need to do to spend more time with her on this? Because each of your children, and once again, I had 5 children. I took on a pretty big responsibility that each of them needs me, differently. And so I'm kind of working through that with her, and what we're going to do. Is it dancing? Is it singing? Is it piano? I'll figure that out.
Yeah. You've done it 4 times one way. Now it's all totally different with a girl, right?
It's totally different.
Yeah, that's sweet. Okay, so you touched on it there, but live by example. They're going to be like you, right? So we'll kind of wrap it up with this, but you're doing a lot of things to lead by example, and there's a lot of fruit being born from that with your kids. And I guess just hit it home for us here. Just sum it all up with, as a dad, as a parent, as you're modeling that, your clearly stated vision is, when I'm in heaven someday, I want my kids to say, God to say, hey, you were a great dad, first and foremost.
Yeah, I think I don't know that I have any just amazing, earth-shattering advice, other than thinking about what your goals are. And, my goal for my children are that they're happy. And I think if they're happy and they're comfortable in their own skin, then all those things you want as a parent are going to happen naturally. Like, are they going to go to college? Are they going to be successful? Are they going to get married? And are they going to make a difference in the world? I think you don't need to worry about all that. I think what you need to do is be kind to them and loving to them, give them like comfort. You want to make them happy. You want to make sure they have a relationship with God at some level. And if you do that, I think everything else kind of takes care of itself. And so I don't have all these big goals for my children. I have goals for me on how to raise my children, how to love my children. And then I think God will take care of the rest with them.
That's great. Happiness, contentment.
Yeah.
Some kids go to college, some kids don't.
Right.
Some kids become professional golfers.
Right.
Some kids don't.
That's right.
But that's good. Just keeping that lens in mind of happiness, contentment, and I like what you said about, you have your own goals, your own aspirations, but they're their own people.
Yeah,
right?
That's it.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, Dr. Lynch, this has been really fun. We could have probably taken each of these topics and talked for like 5 hours on each of them, which maybe we'll do another time. I'd love to have you back on, particularly as COVID continues playing out. I really respect the advice that you're giving and the content you're putting out. I'll put the links to Dr. Lynch's content in the description below here. I also really like the perspective you shared on parenting, how intentional you are with it. Right. And you're obviously doing a lot of things great and intentionally with where your kids are headed and the love you have for them. So don't have a lot of friends because your kids are your friends. I'm going to remember that.
I mean, I have some friends. I just don't have a lot of time for them.
Yeah. That's good. Anyway, so that'll wrap it up here. Appreciate you watching. If you like this video, consider subscribing, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment. If you have any questions for me or Dr. Lynch, put it in there and we'll make sure we get them answered. That's a wrap for the Dad Life podcast. Take care.